Alright, let's see. This back up. Okay, ooh, the light's like, it looks like any effulgence. Alright. Anyway, we'll do the best we can with this. Okay, Om Agyant Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshunun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I offer my obeisances to the spiritual master, for I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and he has opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. So we're continuing our Bhagavad Gita study, chapter 2. What we've discussed so far in chapter 1 is that Arjuna, he's concerned about imminent loss and the lamentation that follows loss. And as we discussed in the first chapter as well, that the lamentation that follows from loss is due to attachment to the temporary. The word for attachment is raga. So we're attached to something that is temporary. It may be relationships, or it can be objects such as a new iPhone X. If you were to lose it, you might be devastated. The something is there that we're attached to this temporary. You can imagine this like a little box, and you just put anything in there that's temporary. And there's attachment to that. And then to the degree there's attachment to that degree, you have to suffer when that thing is ultimately lost. And from there you experience lamentation. And of course, there are a whole host of other emotions. Lamentation is representative of other sorts of emotions that follow loss or imminent loss, such as fear, bewilderment. These are usually the main ones: abhaya moha and shoka, lamentation. Yes, when you lose something, you're afraid, or you're bewildered, or you're lamenting. Well, this is the prominent psychology of everyone in this world, because everyone is attached to something that's temporary. And so there's always fear of imminent loss, or the lamentation that follows actual loss. Bewilderment, trying to figure out how to not lose it, and in this way, this is going on. So we, of course, this is just a quick review of what we learned in chapter 1. The loss is, what is the loss? The loss is this is language that is used often in Vedanta. I am mine. So most beings in this world, they have a self-conception of themselves as the body. I am this body. So I am man, I am woman, I am black, I am white, etc. This is our I concept. And then related to that I concept, there are so many relationships that we form in this material world with animate and inanimate objects, which we call as ours, mine, right? So, and often, I think I mentioned this maybe when we discussed chapter 1, that we often define ourselves in terms of our mind. I usually like to use this phrase, I am mine, because the mind often determines how you think of the I. For example, I am a mother because I have a child. Right, I am a brother because I have a sibling. I am like this. So, and I'm in a particular sort of position. I'm an artist. So because I have artistic skill, I am an artist. So our I is often defined by our mind. So we're attached to the world of I and mind. This is what we're afraid of losing: our sense of self and the things that inform that sense of self, the mind. Yes, we can relate to this. This is very straightforward and obvious. So Arjuna is, of course, faced with losing the world of I and mind, right? When Krishna pulls his chariot in the center of the battlefield, he's seeing all the people that inform his I concept, the brothers and the fathers and the teachers and all the mind that informs his self concept, and they're all going to be slaughtered during the war. And so that sense of loss of mind also affects his sense of self. So he's afraid of losing himself essentially as well as losing those that are dear to him. And of course, again, following that loss of I and mind, there's lamentation. So as we discussed in chapter 1, all of this is due to this one problem here, avidya. Avidya means ignorance, right? And how is ignorance precisely defined, or more precisely defined during our discussion? Anyone recall? Avidya.
It's the perception of a false identity versus the true.
Close, very close, but no cigar. Very close. That was the definition for ego or asmita. Yes.
Is it okay if I cheat?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cheating is allowed. Cheating is allowed.
Lack of awareness of the essential nature of the soul.
We do not know who we are, right? And once you don't know who you are, that leaves you open for identifying with anything and everything, right? So this is the main problem, that we don't actually know who or what we are. So the only way, this fear of losing your I and losing the mind, the only way that's possible is if you have a non-awareness of who you are. Otherwise, you can't actually lose yourself. So only the lack of awareness of that self-understanding causes this problem where you feel that I'm about to lose my I, I'm about to lose my mind. And then the lamentation is one that follows that. So then what would be the solution? What is a natural solution? If Avidya is a problem, what is a natural solution? Enlightenment. So how would you define enlightenment? Knowledge of the self, right? If the problem is ignorance of the self, I don't have self-awareness, then the solution has to be knowledge of the self. What is the actual nature of the self? And then that can help solve this problem. So we're beginning chapter 2, starting verse 11 through 30. And the essential focus of that passage of the Gita, it's a big passage, so we may not be able to get through the entire thing today as desired. But the whole focus of that passage is knowledge of the self. Because the problem is the vidya that is causing this whole string of internal, what's the word I'm looking for? Not degradation, internal suffering. Yeah, I was looking for a cooler word. Descent. I was descent. The whole internal descent into the dark night of the soul is essentially the lack of awareness of the self. That was started with this problem. So the essential or simple solution is to give knowledge of the self. So that is the essential focus of the passage 2:11 through 30. So in one sense, I've said everything that needs to be said about that passage, but we'll look into the details of how Krishna gives enlightenment on the self. So that's going to be our focus here. Let's see if I can erase this. So let's look at 2:11 through 30. We're going to read first verses 11 through 15. I'll just read the English here, and then we're going to go back and look a little bit more closely at some of these verses, just to get us some ideas here of what Krishna is saying. So this is verse 11 through 30. Actually, let me first do this to make it easier on myself. I would have you all read it for participation. It's kind of cool, but there's people online, and so they might not be able to hear your voice unless you're loud like me. But I don't expect that. Everyone can have a black body. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, I have a personality. I like to make jokes like this. Don't mind. So this is verse 11 through 15. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body, from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception. Oh, how do you pronounce this word? Sayan. Oh, Sayan of Bharata. And one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. So this is the beginning of the passage. Essentially, what all Krishna has to say about enlightenment of the soul is contained in these few verses. The first thing he does is chastise Arjuna. So that's very interesting. We'll go back to 2:11 here. Ashochan avashochas tvam pragavadhamsha bhashuse. So he says, you are speaking like someone with pragya. Pragya means like discernment or enlightenment. You're speaking like a learned person, an enlightened person. But you are lamenting for that which is not worthy of lamentation. Therefore, we can understand that you're not enlightened. He's actually being sarcastic. Oh, you're speaking big enlightened words, big man, huh? So many nice arguments you get. But now look at you. Now you're just crying like a little baby over something that's not even worthy of lamentation. Of course, what Krishna considers not worthy of lamentation, we may deem worthy. We'll get to that maybe a little bit. But it's something like, for example, I like to give this example. When I was growing up in Chicago, as a young boy, the Chicago Bulls were winning everything. I know y'all remember Chicago Bulls. And they were winning everything. You know, there was Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Tony Kukoc, Dennis Rodman. And they were, you know, championship after championship. And in Chicago, everyone was attached to the Bulls. I was attached to the Bulls as a little kid. And when they won, you were winning in life. And if they lost, you were losing. And oftentimes when watching a game in Chicago at the United Center, the whole city, when the Bulls would play, the whole city would probably shut down to watch the Chicago Bulls game. And, you know, we would be watching it on the television, of course. And we'd be so absorbed in the game. Sometimes, if the Bulls were losing, your heart, sometimes your heart couldn't take it. You have to turn it off a little bit. I can't look, Jordan went for the three. He missed the three. Oh my God, I can't look at this. And again, you're watching. They're very much attached to the winning. Finally, the Bulls, I always enact this. The Bulls are down by 2 points. There's 10 seconds left on the clock. So, they got just enough time for one final play. So Tony Kukoc, he throws it in, passes it to Rodman. Rodman passes to Pippen. Pippen to Jordan. 3, 2, Jordan for the three. And I always, when he would toss in the air, the whole city would. It is very much like this. And then if, let's say, Jordan missed a shot. Oh. Now, for someone who's attached to basketball, this is a very serious thing. Someone might even get shot. Chicago's a dangerous place, But for someone who's watching this, who's not into basketball, they just say, what type of foolishness is this? It has no practical bearing in your life. You'll not get anything from the victory. You don't lose anything from the loss. This has no practical bearing. But you are lamenting, and it's very serious thing. Maybe for 2-3 days, you're just I can't believe that. 2-3 days. You wake up, you're moping. You go to work, they're how are you, man? So it is a very ridiculous thing, actually. It has nothing to do with your actual life. So in a very similar way, Krishna is saying that this is also the case for you, Arjuna. You're lamenting for something that has nothing to do with your real self, your real life, or your real self. Therefore, although you're speaking like a learned person, it's actually just foolishness. And what is the indication of the foolishness? You're lamenting for that which is not worthy of lamentation. He goes on to describe gatasum agatasum sha nanusho chanti pandita. The pandit. So this is a very important word here in this section. Krishna repeats it. He uses this word about 3 times in the Gita, and almost always in the same way. So I'm going to write this word on the board. It's an important word. The word pandit means a learned person, basically. One who is learned is called a pandit. And the word pandit here, more specifically, means one who understands the difference between the self and the body. So I'm going to maybe even draw this. So I don't even know how to draw this. How do you draw self? So this is the self, the soul, and this is the body. This is actually meant to like a globe, like a world, and the body is a product of the world, a product of the material nature. So this is okay. I think we can understand the essence of things without finding too much judgment. So this is the soul, and this is the body. Here, the bodies are products of the material nature, product of the world. So a pandit is one who knows the difference between the stick man and the globe. It's called pandit. Are you a pandit? You understand this difference? Want to know the difference between the self or consciousness, the soul, and the body. This is body, a product of the world. Then he is called a pandit. And Krishna is saying here, the pundit does not lament for the living or dying. Gata aso means when the life heirs leave the body. So that is death. That's usually a cause of lamentation. Just like if you see someone, let's say in the class, suddenly the life heirs just go out the body, that would be scary and maybe a cause of lamentation, especially if it's a loved one or someone connected to your body. So the learned person doesn't lament for that, nor does he lament for the person in whom the life heirs are still existing. So translated here as the living, which is basically what everyone laments about, especially when you think about this. I like to give this example just because it's so much in our face today, the political situation. So we're lamenting about someone dying and we're lamenting about someone living. So Krishna is saying that the Pandit is one who does not lament for those things because he knows the difference between the actual self and the body. So the body may be in a position that is lamentable, but knowing the difference between the actual self and that body, the Pandit does not actually lament for that. He laments for something much deeper. We don't. This is actually a sidebar point, but you have a verse in the Bhagavatam, one of our other sacred texts that we study, where Prahlad Maharaj is saying, "Shocheta tovi mukacheta sa indriyartha maya sukhaya haramudara tovi mudha." Where Prahlad Maharaj is saying, "I do lament." He's an enlightened person, and he said, "I lament for the souls in this world, but not because of their bodily situations in life or in death, but vimukha chaitasaha, because they are turned away from the divinity, turned away from God, and they're suffering ignorance." So the lamentation is for something much more fundamental than just the states of their bodies in the material world, which are anyway unpredictable and temporary. So it's a very interesting point. So this pundit word is very important. So in the next verse, Krishna starts to speak about the actual soul, 2:12. "Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all the kings on the battlefield." So we're going to be making a list of, we're going to be doing this. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller here. This would be a good spot. So what is this guy here? Yeah. So you're all pundits. And this is?
Body.
Okay. So you're a pundit. You know the difference. It's in my figures. 6 figures. So so he says here, Krishna says, "Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all the kings." So he's giving a explanation of the ontological position of the soul. So it was always existing. It's quite bewildering to try to think about because we have minds that are conditioned by past, present, and future. So the sense of always being is quite bewildering, actually. The technical, maybe I'll pass on this technical word. Anyways, it's kind of an important word. The word here is I looked at several commentaries on this. The word here is pragabhava. The word abhava means non-existence, and the word prag means a previous non-existence. So there was no previous non-existence. Like for your body was previously not existing, right? Before you were born. It was previously not existing. Yes, it's okay. And then after you took birth, is existing. It's existing now for some time. But then there will be death of this body, and then your body will not exist again, right? So your body had previous, let's put it over here. This is the world. The body had previous non-existence. And it will also have what's called post non-existence. When it dies, it will cease to exist forever. Yes? So this is another word here. These terms are not so important, but this will come up a few times in the Gita, so might as well get it in now. We're learning about the soul. This is called Dvamsa Abhava. So just like, who here likes cheesecake? Everyone likes cheesecake here? Cheesecake, very nice. You can go to Divya's get cheesecake. So you like cheesecake. Before that cheesecake was created by Divya, it had previous non-existence. And then the cheesecake is brought to you, and very shortly it will have post non-existence. It will cease to exist forevermore after you devour it. Yes? So that is the nature of all things material, whether it's a cheesecake or it's the body. All things material have at one point previously not existing, and then they come into existence for some time, then they cease to exist forevermore after they perish. But the nature of the soul is opposite of that. So it had no previous non-existence, And it will also have no post non-existence, which means it's existing forevermore. Does that make sense? I think I did okay with that, even though it's kind of a technical thing. So never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Right? But that is not true of matter or the body or the world. It is opposite. Yeah, so far so good. So then Krishna goes on into 13, very important verse, often quoted. Dehinosmin yatha dehe komara yovanam jara. Tata deham tara praptir diras tatranam uyati. Another very important word he uses here. First he says, Dehinosmin yatha dehi komara yovanam jara. So Dehina means the self that is inside the body. So the person who is embodied, he is traveling in that body in different states, right? From boyhood to youth to old age. That one unchanging self is existing in changing states inside the body. Just like you were young at one point, then you get a little bit older, and then you get old. You still consider yourself older, but then at a certain point, you're like actually just old, when you're young, you think 30 is old, but that's like older, but then there's like an actual old, And then the body will perish. But there's an unchanging self through all those changes of the body. So that is what is being described here. So the question can come to Arjuna, who is your affection for? Is it for this body? Is it for the actual self? If it's for the self, then the self is existing in an unchanging state through all these changes. Therefore, there's nothing to lament. Rather, in one sense, it can be a time for rejoicing. Just like when the body changes from boyhood to youth, everyone rejoices, right? We have birthdays. We were the other day celebrating Doya Goranga's birthday. It was a very funny celebration. It was a lot of laughter. It was a lot of rejoicing. No one was like, Doya, you got older today. No one was crying. There was a time for rejoicing. So as these changes are going, someone can argue, or the argument can come that this is actually, Krishna will actually give this argument later on. This is actually a time for rejoicing. Because when they are killed on the battlefield, they'll get new, wonderful bodies. So this is a time for rejoicing. This won't be a good argument to make people at like a funeral or something. But it goes to show you that when you're looking at things from the perspective of the soul, how things start to actually shift. Your perception changes when you're looking from this perspective versus when you're looking from the perspective or reference point of the world and it's a very different perception. So you're lamenting that the bodies will die, but I say it's a time for rejoicing. Because the persons for whom you are concerned, is particularly Bhishma and Drona we were hearing about, they're very pious persons. When they are killed, they will get nice bodies. So this is a time for rejoicing. He may give some. So therefore, tata deham tara prapti. So just as the self is passing through these different bodies and unchanging, so similarly at the time of death, the soul is just getting another situation, another body is going elsewhere. Now, Krishna uses this word. The Dhira, he is not bewildered by this. So this is another very important word. The Dhira, again, is related to this word pandit. So the Dhira means sober. So a person who is pandit, who knows the difference between the self and the world, who's learned or enlightened in this way, they are also Dhira. They're also sober through all these different changing situations. They don't become overly emotional. And later on in this passage, I just want to get out this thing. Later on in 2:15, Krishna uses the same word dhira when he says samasuka dukkam dhiram. That the dhira is seeing equally both happiness and distress situations in this world. Happiness being they live, distress being they die. But sama, he sees both equally because he's dhira. And he's dhira or able to be sober because he's pandit. Whereas the opposite person who is a pandit and not learned, not having this enlightenment or conflating the self and the world, then they are also adhira, not sober. That means overtaken by the emotional turmoil that is existing because of identification with the world. So one final point here on this point, 2:14. and this is a very, very important point because it pertains to spiritual practice. How do you, we actually live in the body and we experience the turmoil of the mind and so on when going through these difficult situations. So even if I accept this philosophy that I'm different from the world, I'm different from the body, how do I actually process these situations that I'm dealing with, especially internally, like losing someone, for example, a loved one? Again, it's easier to talk about losing loved ones when we're in a Bhagavad Gita class. Don't try this at a funeral or something like that. Hey guys, why y'all tripping? You know, they got, that is not exactly a good idea. Of course, this is a side point. I often wonder, one of the interesting features of when I got involved with Krishna consciousness and so on was to see that they celebrated like what we call as disappearance days, so the passing on a person. There'd be like some lamentation, like a somewhat sad song is sung at the beginning, and then it like launches into kirtan, and it was like, hey yo, there's huge, and then a big feast is served out, and it's like a time of celebration. Definitely a totally different perspective. But how do I actually process loss and so on that's actually disturbing internally that's happening in the mind? Arjuna may say, I accept this philosophy that yes, I am different from the world, but I'm actually seeing Bhishma, I'm seeing Drona, and I'm actually going to see them pass also. That's going to be very disturbing. So Krishna says in response to that very nice verse, Matra Sparshas tu Konteya Shitoshna Sukadukha Daha. Agama Payino Anityas Tam Tatikrusavarta. So Matra Sparshas means when the senses are touching their objects. So you have your eyes, your eye sees form, your ear sees sound, your nose sees smell, your skin sees touch, tactile sense. And what's the last missing one? The tongue sees taste, right? So matra sparshas means when your senses touch their objects, then what happens? You get a certain type of experience. Shitoshna sukha dukkha daha. The experiences may be hot, cold, happy, or distress. But it is very unpredictable. Agama apayino anitya. It's not permanent, it's also unpredictable. Right? For example, when it's hot outside and you take cold shower, feels very nice, isn't it? Wow. And that same cold shower in the winter time, it's the same cold water, maybe the same temperature also. But in the winter time, you experience it differently because of the mind. It's a different sort of sense perception, which is unpredictable, or in this case, it's kind of predictable, but it's winter time and cold water. So it's unpredictable and it's temporary. So you should not allow the mind to be bewildered by these changing states, which are not only temporary, but they're unpredictable. And we kind of talked about this in our last class also to some degree when we talked about the Aryans versus Anaryans, putting emotions. The culture of a self-realized culture puts duty over emotions because emotions are temporary, unpredictable. So here's the soul, and here's the lens. This is supposed to be a lens. They're glasses. Does that look like glasses?
When you tell us they are.
Ah, come on. Hold on, I'm gonna change this.
You gotta put the side.
Our ears see it.
Huh?
Our ears see it.
Your ears see it. Oh, aren't we clever? Okay, these are glasses. Okay, this is gonna be a great drawing. This is worthy of some sort of reward. So the conscious being is looking through the lens of his mind at the world. So if the mind is colored green, look at that. So clever, isn't it? Then what does he see? He sees a green world because he's looking through green glasses. So the perception of the world is depending on the mental states. And these mental states are, again, not only they're temporary, but they're unpredictable. So therefore, Krishna says you have to learn how to tolerate them and not allow them to deviate from your path of progress based on actual spiritual principles. Right? The example and the point here is that You have to perform some dharma to purify yourself in order to make actual enlightenment. And if you allow yourself to be deviated from your path because of the mental state, you'll not actually achieve it. So you have to learn how to deal with perceptions. In other words, here you are hearing that you're spirit, but you really very much feel that you're your body. And instead of acting according to your knowledge, you want to act according to your feelings, right? That is always the struggle in spiritual life. The struggle between what you feel, which, and again, feelings at our present state may be very much informed by ignorance or not enlightenment. So there's always a struggle between what you feel and what you know to be true. This tension is there. So Krishna is telling here you have to tolerate sometimes what you're feeling, especially when those feelings are not actually informed by proper knowledge or enlightenment. And you have to stay steady on your actual path. And then in 215, I've already quoted, the one who can actually do that and remain sober in the face of happiness and distress, that such a person becomes qualified to taste the, I put it in my question as the ambrosia. Anyway, I used to watch like Hercules and Xena and all these things, and they used to eat ambrosia was like the food of the gods. I thought it was a good translation because the word amrita means immortality. So you'll be able to attain immortality or enlightenment if you're able to stay on your path, not allowing yourself to be deviated by your feelings, but rather allowing yourself to remain guided by your knowledge despite your feelings. So that is a tolerance. They're very difficult. So that's what we're going to cover today. This 11 through 15 is like an essence of the whole passage. We'll finish the passage on Monday, the rest of the passage, which is a little bit, just kind of a list of the qualities between matter and spirit. But these are the essential points here. I usually open it up I have a questionnaire, so people kind of work on the questionnaire together for about 10 minutes. And then we kind of take questions, or we can take questions now because Tiffany, you have one question.
I think you kind of
Covered
answered it.
Okay.
My question was, I find interesting the way Krishna immediately responded with that sarcastic kind of like, oh, here you are talking like an enlightened person, but you're speaking out of straight ignorance. My question was, where does compassion come in? At the front lines of a war. Something very violent, something very serious. And again, like you said, we know we're spirit, but we're acting from feeling because we're at the vantage point of the body.
Yes.
And so I guess that immediate reaction of like, what are you lamenting for? You're lamenting for no reason. It's like, it's a little bewildering to me that God himself would respond with that instead of, I totally feel you, and yes, it's great that you have compassion, but that's what I want you to have. That's what I teach all the time, right? That's what we're taught. Instead of that response first, he immediately went to like, what are you lamenting for? Like, what are you mad about? Like, this is, you're just a bunch of toy soldiers on a battlefield. This isn't even real. You're all gonna go home after this anyway. It's fine. Just kill them, do your dharma, and so that kind of, I remember when I first read this verse, I was like really like thrown off by it.
Yeah,
and funny enough, I haven't really gotten past this chapter.
No.
So I don't think that's a coincidence. I'm having like some, I don't know, my soft, my gushy heart is like having issues with this.
Well, there are many learning persons in the audience today. I can open it up to them as well. I'll just share some quick thoughts. The first one is that compassion comes in many forms. So it is also compassion for the mother. For example, when we were growing up, if we were playing in the middle of the street where we could get killed, and our mom said, stop playing there. And we keep doing it because she didn't really say it like she was supposed to say it. And then she yells at us and we still play in the street. And then mom would say, if you don't get in this, I'm gonna whoop that. Then we understand. There's also compassion, although it's very harsh. And we may experience it at that right in the moment harshly. So compassion need not always look the way that we expect it to look. So that may be one thing you can juggle with to try to get through this. Another point about this, and we mentioned this in our first class, that the definition of ignorance is the precise definition is that one takes the non-self to be the self, one takes the impure to be the pure, one takes the ephemeral to be the eternal, and one takes that which is a cause of dukkha to be a cause of sukha. So that means, and then even if you look at the Sanskrit words, they're exact opposites of each other. So by this definition of ignorance, our conventional awareness is exactly opposite the truth. So in describing this in our first class, we made the point, and I think it's a very important point, that the truth is often confrontational for us. Because if our normal way of perception is exactly opposite of the truth, then naturally, if we hear the truth, even if spoken very nicely, it will be very confronting. And indeed, I've seen, very simple points made in a very gentle way still be very confronting for persons because it's opposed to their own conventional present awareness of things. So, in other words, it may not be the case that even if Krishna said it nicely, that it would be any less agitating. Because if Arjuna is in fact informed, a vision is informed by ignorance, the truth will be confronting no matter how it's said. So that's something you may also can juggle with. Another point is that you can also consider the relationship that Krishna already had with Arjuna. So it's not like he's meeting someone off the street and saying, "What is this nonsense?" Or someone invites me to a funeral. I'm like, "Why are y'all crying? Y'all are so ignorant," because I don't have that relationship. Or even with certain persons in the Bhakti Center, I have a certain relationship where I know I can say this, and it may sound a little strong, but they'll take it and they'll appreciate it. Whereas I do the same thing with someone else, they won't. So Krishna already had a very established relationship with Arjuna. And so he could understand that he could take it. Furthermore, this is also one of Arjuna has already surrendered himself as a disciple. And a disciple means one who is prepared to be disciplined. Disciplined, I think even perhaps in some cases physically, and at least in India they had that whooping culture too. It's a common thing. But also conceptually disciplined, chastised. And that's part of what it means to be a surrendered disciple, that you're giving power of returning to this person to even chastise me, that you're deviating. And that is also compassion. So those are 4 ideas that you might can juggle with. I don't know if you want to Ganesham or Holiday Shakti. There's so many.
I just remember reading that Bhakti Siddhanta says that we require like a jolt to change.
A jolt to change. Mm.
Like imagine if life just treated us with nothing but like everything was smooth and compassionate, kindness.
Mm.
But then when life gets difficult and something suddenly happens abruptly, it wakes us up in a certain way, and change usually comes from that. So something about like a jolt or strong language, it may not everybody may respond to it, but like you said, Arjuna being like a disciple and being ready, it was effective. That's the point. It was effective.
Right.
And so someone else may require maybe a little bit of a different approach, but I still think there's something to be said for kind of a jolt.
Yeah.
Whether it comes through someone's words or it comes through material nature, but it wakes us up in a way that just, everything was just much more softer. It may not have that power.
Yeah.
So
You reminded me of one of my closest friends. He's now a practicing devotee of Krishna. His first visit to the temple, he came to do a car puja, a very prominent, popular thing now in a lot of Hindu temples. You can see his car puja. So he's born in a Jain family, not particularly religious or spiritual, but his mom told him he should do a car puja. So he came to the temple. It was right after one of our Bhagavatam classes had ended early in the morning. And I walked up to him, and this is how I usually would greet people. And I was like, "You have any questions?" It was like, "Hi, how are you? Welcome to the temple," or anything like that. I was like, "You have any questions?" And he said, "Yeah." He was like, "Yeah, I do. Do you guys do car puja?" And I said, "What nonsense!" I immediately, and then I started like just chastising him. I said, "You don't come to a temple to do car puja. You come to inquire about Bhagavad Gita and all this." So he argued with me for a little bit. Then I refused to give a car. He said, "So what should I do with my car?" I said, "Only 2 things. You should use your car to go to work, and you should use it to come to the temple and inquire about Bhagavad Gita." So not exactly compassionate or seemingly insensitive. And of course, I'm kind of like that, but I'm not totally insensitive. I have a very sensitive side that most people don't always think I have. I'm a pretty sensitive person. Anyway, he came back that evening for Bhagavad Gita. I was like, dang, it worked. later on, one of my mentors in Chicago, His Holiness Rompa Swami, he kind of was getting on my case he's like, there are better ways of communicating to people. I was like, he became a devotee. I say my way was pretty effective. So he started laughing. When he heard that I did that, he literally laughed for like 15 minutes. Like he was like, he couldn't believe that I would do that. And then he said there are better ways. So and I don't do that with everyone. And it's not that that's the best way. I don't advocate communicating to people like that, first timers, especially to the temple. But somehow or other, it was a jolt, and he became very fascinated, and he later became a devotee. Harisham, it was Harisham. Yes, Joseph.
So I have a question. It's I can't remember what it was about before this. When you were talking about Michael Jordan and talking about Chicago Bulls, it's sort of, and then you're saying you kind of related that to like politics, and then how like it's not really super important. These are like it doesn't really affect us. However, but it's like these people's decisions affect the planet Earth, and it's like it could create pollution can happen based on the decisions of the political candidates that are up there.
Yeah.
Essentially, and it's like I guess my question is I've heard of like the Earth being like Gaia. Is the Earth the living thing?
Yes.
Does the Earth have a soul?
Yeah.
Or is if the Earth dies, there's not going to be another Earth. I mean, maybe there is another planet, that'll sprout the second this one's not there, but it's just.
Yes, there's a deity of the earth, a personified form in the earth, as Kaur or goddess Bhumi. We have that concept also. So again, most of the Gita will be reconciling ourselves to this sort of philosophy. So we're not this body, and these things are essentially temporary and in that sense illusory. And then in one sense, what is the use of all these things? So that conclusion can easily come up. So most of the Gita will be reconciling ourselves with this sort of philosophical understanding what our actual existence in the world. So you'll see Gita dealing with topics of dharma and how to exist in the world. Because how do you reconcile yourself to this philosophy when you're actually existing in the world and you have different life situations that you have to deal with? Arjuna himself was about to deal with a war. And I also think it's very unique or interesting that Krishna is using this passage of the Gita to convince him to fight the war. So although the knowledge of the soul being different from the body inspires a sense of sort of detachment and aloofness, Krishna in this section is using this knowledge to inspire Arjuna to fight, but with a different understanding of the situation. So, yes, in other words,
I guess my question is more specifically, it's like, should we care about politics? Like, but from this perspective, it seems like it's almost like no.
Yeah, so that's what most of the Gita will be. Its focus will be like this. I would say you can care, but it will have to be a qualified sort of caring, and that's where Krishna will spend most of the work of Gita trying to do. It's a qualified sort of. I'll give an example. I have a black body, so in a political situation, suppose someone calls me a bad name, a racist name. Now, when I think I'm the body, I have one sort of response to that. And when I think I'm not the body, I have a completely different response internally, at least, to that name. Now, externally, I may have to act in a very particular way because of the situation, as Arjuna will be obliged to act in a particular way because of the situation. But the way he processes the situation is very different when you're looking from the reference point of the world or the body versus when you're looking from the reference point of the actual self. So then that's what the Gita is going to ultimately inspire us to do, that how do you process the world situation from the reference point of the soul? At the present moment, we're processing these things from the reference point of thinking ourselves the body, and therefore it impacts us in a very different way. Whereas the person who's processing from the soul, he's also active in the world, as Arjuna will be active in the world, but his internal processing and thinking is very different because he knows that there's an ultimate purpose to life. And the ultimate purpose isn't the political situation or any situation in the world. We'll hear in the Gita, it is ultimately transcendence. But then I exist in the world in a specific way with this purpose in mind, with that perspective in mind, and so on. So that is kind of what, and therefore you see, the Dhira. So the person who has this knowledge and how they deal with the situation, versus the person who's uphanded, who doesn't have this knowledge and how they deal with the situation. Idea, without sobriety or emotional content. So.
Thank you.
It's like detached.
Yes, detached care is a word we like to use, or dispassionate. So yeah, it's very interesting. How do you do passionate work dispassionately? And this will be a lot of the thrust of the karma yoga doctrine that we'll hear in the first 6 chapters of the Gita. Doing, living in a passionate world. The earth is a representation of the passion world in a dispassionate way. So in Krishna yoga karma sukoshanam. He says this is the great art of work. Later on, he will use this yoga karma sukoshanam. This is the art, how to live in a passionate world dispassionately. In other words, it's not a very easy thing. It's like walking on a tightrope and keeping your intelligence very focused. This will be a lot of the work of the Gita. You question you want to ask. And we'll end with your question because my time is up.
In the 214, Krishna is saying, to tolerate.
Yes.
He says at the last that one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed.
Yes.
So, how do you tolerate something which your mind is already accustomed to? Let's say being happy with those things which you are attached to positively, and being sad or being morose which you don't like.
Right. So what's the question? How do you
tolerate for those things which you are already?
How do you tolerate without being disturbed? Like, I'm already disturbed. Say, tolerate without being disturbed.
Yeah, just like you're not attached to them, it feels like very difficult to.
My understanding of this phrase here is that you tolerate here means you don't deviate from your path. So there's the emotional turmoil that's going on, which often causes us to deviate from our path, our focus on our, whatever our dharma for the purpose of purification and so on. So tolerate here means don't deviate from your path just because these emotions have suddenly springed up and are bewildering you. You remain focused on the path and endure it because they're temporary. Anitya, they will pass also. So you don't want to allow something that's just there for a short time to just deviate you from your focus, from your further progress. So you have to tolerate without being disturbed means don't be disturbed means don't move from your path. Means you will be disturbed only. The mind situation, you're disturbed. Something that you don't like is coming at you, you're disturbed. Something you do like is being snatched away, you're disturbed. But not being disturbed means not giving up your path of dharma. In this context, specifically your dharma for the purpose of purification. You're not giving that up just because this thing has come up in the mind. And you're tolerant, you're enduring. Right.
I feel like I have sort of like so with courage, I suppose with courage, it's like courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite of the fear. So it's like even though you're feeling like the sense of loss, you're still behaving appropriately. That circumstance.
Yeah. The example Prabhupada gives in the commentaries, actually all the commentaries give the same, is that when it's the month of Magh as a month, then you continue to take bath. I remember not understanding that for many, many years because, and the West was like, what's the difficulty? You just turn on the hot water. But then later on, when you go to India, they're like, oh, now I get there. There is no hot water, or it's like very rare you'll find a place where it's hot water, or you're taking bath in the river. So when it's cold, even though you don't want to take bath in the river because it's cold, it's my duty to take bath. So I'll not deviate from that duty just because the mind is disturbing. That's the idea there. Yeah, you do a lot of that when you're in India. I have many experiences when we had stayed in these fancy, even the fancy places in India, these fancy hotels, the hot water goes out there also. You turn the water, then you turn it on the hot knob, and you like wait in the back of the shower. You like stick your toe out and see. Oh, all the time it's happening like this. But then you say, okay, I'll not take bath. No, it is my duty to take bath. So I'll not deviate from that because now my mind is like, no, it's too cold. I'll not allow that to deviate me from taking bath. That's the example that it's given by all the commentators there. So obviously a very challenging thing, but it is the work of spiritual life, actually. There are always, again, as I mentioned in the class, there will always, once you really start to kind of really try to understand spiritual knowledge. It's like one thing when you have the Facebook spiritual knowledge where it's just like a nice little, I feel good, you get a dopamine hit, and then that's where it ends. When we're actually doing the work of trying to understand spiritual life and what it obliges of you once you have knowledge, then you'll always encounter this tension internally. The tension between what you know and the tension between what you feel. It's something that you're always kind of contending with when you're trying to progress in the spiritual life. If you're just doing the Facebook wisdom, you will never feel that tension. You always just feel like, yeah, I'm doing light work. I'm good. I'm like, when you really try to understand spiritual knowledge and you kind of see the gravity of what's being asked of us for our own development, this will be a tension that comes up, and please tolerate and persevere. And sama sukha dukam dhira. If you can do that, then you can taste that, the nectar, the immortality, the ambrosia. You'll be able to experience it. All right. Normally we would work on the questionnaire, but since we didn't finish the passage, we'll do it on Monday, the questionnaire. Thank you all very much for coming and participating, for your wonderful questions. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thanks a lot. Namaste.
That's a cute rock.
I always use it. All right, later, guys on YouTube.